Welcome to Currently, The Conversation, the companion podcast to Currently, the News Roundup, where we dig deeper into the people, places, passions, and sometimes the problems shaping life in Northwest Michigan. I'm your host, Christal Frost. Today we're tackling one of the most urgent issues facing our region, housing. Across Northwest Michigan, families, seniors, and even working professionals are struggling to find safe, attainable places to live. Joining me to talk about what's being done to change that is Yarrow Brown, Executive Director of Housing North, an organization leading the charge to make housing solutions a reality through collaboration, education, and advocacy. We'll explore what's driving the crisis, the creative partnerships making progress, and how we can all play a role in building a stronger, more sustainable community. Be sure to subscribe to Currently the Conversation at christalfrost.com. But now, let's welcome Yarrow Brown. How are you, Yarrow?
I'm good. Thanks for having me.
It's so nice to have you on the show today. And, you know, I think that when we start talking about housing, almost instinctively, people either want to stop the conversation because they don't know if there's even a solution about this, or people want to avoid the conversation because they don't even want to go there. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, I think in a lot of cases, yes.
Yeah.
But I do think every meeting we open up when we ask them to talk about housing or share an experience, it does get pretty emotional, and almost everybody has something to say.
Absolutely. Well, why don't you tell us a little bit about Housing North's mission?
So our mission is to make sure that all families in Northwest Michigan have a safe and healthy place to live. And we focus on removing the barriers to housing.
And when you say Northwest Michigan, are we talking about the 10-county region?
Yes, we cover the 10-county footprint. It's also known as Region D with the new statewide housing plan.
So that's a pretty, that's a lot of miles to cover.
Yes, it's 10 counties and 187 units of government.
Wow. Oh, my goodness. So as far as, the mission, what about the history of Housing North?
So we actually were born out of Networks Northwest,
Great.
Which is our regional planning organization. So Sarah Lucas, who now heads up the Office of Rural Prosperity, I believe had a vision and was running a housing solutions network for years, trying to, come up with a way to really put housing at the forefront. We also, I feel like, we're born out of the Grand Vision, which I know isn't always a popular term, but I think we are one of the action items that came out of that. So the Housing Solution Network and people came together to form an organization that focused solely on housing. So in 2018, that's when we became Housing North.
So you kind of came from Networks Northwest and that sort of vision. And then since 2018, you've been solely on your own.
Actually, in 2020 is when we became a nonprofit.
Okay.
So because we have a policy and advocacy focus and needed to kind of push forward a very specific mission, it made sense to become our own nonprofit.
And how about you personally? I mean, being in this field in housing advocacy, it's very difficult work. It can be very, very rewarding. But what drove you personally to get into this?
That is a very good question. So I am a conservation biologist.
Oh, wow.
My background, I came from the Leelanau Conservancy. So I spent the 12 years prior to this working in land protection and stewardship. Mm-hmm. I knew about community land trusts. I knew that a lot of the tools and resources that we were using in private land protection could be brought into housing. It was also right when the pandemic started. And I think I just saw a job and applied on a whim. And so it wasn't really where I thought I would be going career-wise, but I thought that I could bring a lot of my skills into housing, and I knew that it was a critical need in the community.
And so it's sort of housing adjacent. You need land, right, when it comes to housing, but very, very complex.
Yes, very complex. And I think, some of those same tools to protect land, I think can also be translated to housing, including deed restrictions, for year-round housing, figuring out ways to incentivize, tax incentives to create affordable housing. So while that happens on the land conservation field, I think in housing we need to get better about it because we really do need more incentives, especially in Northwest Michigan.
So we are going to, kind of shift gears here and talk about the landscape right now in Northwest Michigan. So in this 10-county footprint where Housing North covers, what does the housing look like today? Are we at a crisis level right now?
Yes, I do think we are still in a housing crisis.
Yeah.
I think Northwest Michigan is doing amazing and we are really leading. So I think we need to celebrate that. But
Good.
As you mentioned, housing is very complex. It is a marathon, not a sprint. And, I do really think there's so many barriers still to overcome to really meet our housing need, but we have made progress. So in 2023, we knew we needed 31,000 units across the whole spectrum, including market rate housing. Our goal was to build 10% a year, so about 31 units a year. We're not there, but we know about 4,100 units have been built or building permits pulled since 2023.
Wow. So just in 2 years, that's pretty good progress.
It is. And I think a lot of that is coming out of the pandemic. So for years, we didn't see a lot of progress. People were kind of stuck. Now it's really moving. And we have, quite a few units in progress.
Yeah.
Whether or not those actually become tangible housing units to meet the need is still up in the air, but we're tracking about 5,000.
So when you're talking about the overall housing need, and you said 31,000 units is what was needed, and that was, back then, who is most affected by this housing crisis?
I would say, everyone is affected, but those that are making 50% or less of the area median income, even up to 80% are completely priced out. We now have tools to help with those, in that 80 to 120% of the area median income. And I can explain more about that because it's complex. But essentially, the people who live here year round don't make enough to afford a lot of the housing.
So when you talk about the area median income, what is that?
So that is kind of an average or a median. It takes into account everybody's income, even those who are making income outside of our state.
Okay.
So it's not 100% reflective of what people make in Northwest Michigan.
Okay.
Every county has a different area median income. Leelanau County and Grand Traverse has a significantly higher one. It's probably depending, and it also depends on your household size.
Sure.
We tend to talk about it on average as a four-unit household because that's just kind of an average number. So in Grand Traverse County and Leelanau, it's close to 90,000 a year. So that's pretty high.
That's the area median income. So if you're talking about people in that 50% range, you're talking 45,000.
Really, anybody making less than 50,000 a year, is struggling.
Wow.
And we tend to say that if you are a single person household, it is nearly impossible to find a place to live right now.
That $45,000 number, too, for a lot of people who are just starting out in their careers, especially in the world of social services or in any sort of human services, that's where they start.
Yes.
So you're talking about people who are the helpers needing assistance with finding housing themselves.
Yeah, the essential fabric of our community. And we also have a lot of seniors on a fixed income. We have a lot of retirees moving here. It's not just the workforce, but it is a lot of people that would like to stay here year round and are simply priced out.
Now, when we talk about the average rent cost, if you will, I grew up here, right? So I was born in, I was born at Munson Medical at the old hospital, osteopathic. But I grew up between Interlaken and Beulah for most of my life. I've lived in this area. And I would see, rent increases, or you would go, okay, maybe you can't afford to live downtown, but you can afford to live maybe on the outskirts, or you could live, a 10-minute drive away. That has gone away. When we talk about the cost of living here, it is in the entire county, there's really not an affordable place at this point.
It would be very tricky to find.
Yeah.
And we have a 0.7% vacancy rate in our region. So in a healthy market, it would be between 4 and 6%. So that means that there's so limited housing stock. And then even what is being built, while it's coming online, a lot of that isn't available to it's getting scooped up so quickly.
Right.
I think it will get better. I do think, over time. But right now, I would say it's changed a lot. So in 2020, we were saying we need homes or rentals that are $1,000 or less per month, and homes that are $200,000 to purchase. Now that's almost double, or we go up and we say we need rents that are $1,500 a month or less, or homes that are $250,000. Now even $300,000 or less, because it's just changed.
Yeah,
we need it all, but I think it is. There's high demand to live here.
Yeah.
So we're competing with a lot of outside forces for those that grew up here and are seeing that change.
What about What about the world of short-term rentals? How has that impacted housing stock here in northern Michigan?
I don't have, a study that says that necessarily, but we do know that
anecdotally,
they impact year-round housing. In the housing needs assessment, we focused on the seasonal workforce, and Networks Northwest had come out with a study in 2020.
Yeah.
So they really addressed that. Our region hosts 25% of the state's seasonal and short-term rentals. So that's a quarter in 10 counties. So I know there's an impact. I think what we really try to talk about is creating a balance.
Yeah.
So where should those short-term rentals go? We're not opposed to them. We need them. We have a tourist economy, but it's impacting neighborhoods. It is taking away year-round rentals. We know that this is a high-demand place to live. So not only are we seeing short-term rentals impacting that, but the seasonal folks, we call it dark house syndrome.
Yeah.
The other thing that's happening is people don't want to move within the space because they're pretty comfortable, and then their taxes will go up. So all of these factors, including short-term rentals, are taking away year-round housing.
Is that one of the reasons why it makes this issue so difficult to tackle, especially here in Northwest Michigan?
Yes, and we can't just tax short-term rentals and create a fund like people think, or like other states. We do need to have that go through the state legislature. Okay. So I think there's a lot of differences between us and other states because of how we tax things, and we have the non-homestead and homestead tax rate. So if you don't live here year-round, you pay more taxes.
Right.
And that can be nice for our schools, and there's a lot of benefits to that. But if you are a property manager or landlord and you want to rent, you're now still paying that non-homestead tax rate. So, that can influence somebody if they keep it as a year-round rental or a short-term rental.
So a big part of what you do is to build awareness and to advocate. How much of your time would you say, Yarrow, is spent in that advocate role and just educating people, but also advocating at the state level about some of these changes that are necessary?
I think it's a huge part, of our role. I would say we do it local, regional, and statewide. Mm-hmm. So as the executive director and with our policy advisor, I'm really engaging with a lot of our elected officials and trying to, let them know what we're working on. Right. So it's always at the forefront. But yeah, it is a huge part of what we do, and we kind of do it on refresh and repeat.
Yeah,
because
right.
I would say every county has its own personality, its own needs, its own culture. So we have to adapt a lot of what we're saying and doing, depending on the community. And that takes a lot of time and energy.
I think that's so important to point out, because I really do think that people sort of put everyone in Northwest Michigan into sort of one category. And it is vastly different based on where you are. I mean, if you're in Wexford County versus Emmett County, it's going to be extraordinarily different. It's maybe some similarities, but when you're talking about culture and when you're talking about need even, it's going to be different. So you do have to sort of code switch a bit county to county, right?
Yes, and even though Petoskey is only an hour and a half, 2 hours away, some people feel like we are so far from Traverse City. Mm-hmm. So we are all part of this region, yes. But people do want to also be themselves. Each county kind of wants to do their own thing and not be like another county. I mean, there's a lot of dynamics there, right? But I think they can all learn from each other and still be their own solution maker in their own way.
Yeah.
So that's been really interesting. And different counties have different tools and resources. And when the elected officials change every couple of years, that is also a huge challenge.
That is a huge challenge. You don't think about that, but that happens often.
It does, and it completely can change our progress in some of our communities.
So when you're talking about some of these barriers, can we talk a little bit more about those cultural, political, financial barriers that are standing in the way of housing solutions? I mean, it is county by county, but there's also the statewide barrier as well.
Yeah, I mean, we just haven't been building enough housing, and that's like really no one person's or anybody's fault, but it really put us in a quandary. And so I think we love our natural resources. We love our way of life here. Mm-hmm. So I think it's really uncomfortable for people who come here, move here from other places. They don't want to see that change. The people who live here don't want to see that change. We also are sort of behind when it comes to adopting tools and practices and policies. So there's just a lot that goes into, I guess, making the communities ready for that.
Yeah.
And I also think there's just people really love where they live and have a strong sense of place. So that change is really uncomfortable, but I have seen communities really come around and embrace it in a way that they realize they are going to lose that quality of life if they don't address housing.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's interesting too, as far as this region in particular, where we do have such a sense of community. That is one thing that I think is very. I don't know that it's unique because, like I said, I grew up here. I don't know what other communities are doing, but it feels like it's very unique in that we do have this real sense of community, and it sometimes surprises me when I talk to someone and they don't know that there's a housing crisis going on. Can you speak to that at all?
Well, yeah, a little bit. I mean, I moved here in
Yeah.
2008 from, I'm a Youper, so I grew up in the UP, but I didn't live in Michigan. I lived across the, country and world until I guess I was in my 30s and came back here. I never thought I'd come back to Michigan. I didn't even know about Leelanau County.
Right.
I was a Door County person, so that's where we went, which is very different from Leelanau, if you haven't been there. And so I was blown away. I moved here as a single person. I could put a tab at the hardware store in Cedar. People were so friendly and welcoming, and I think that's the tourist economy too. And I think it's just Michigan. We're very friendly and open, but I really could tell from everywhere else I've lived. I don't think I've lived somewhere where people have more of a sense of place, and especially in Leelanau, that connection to the protected land, to the Sleeping Bear Dunes, to the lake. So I think that comes with its challenges, but I also think there's a lot of people too who live here that aren't year-round voters. And so I think we really just need to focus on, I guess, sort of what are the main things the year-round residents need, and how can we take the influence and the opinion of others who maybe only live here part-time, but really do have a significant, influence, I would say, on local politics and decision-making.
That's a good way to put that. Let's, I don't want to discount all of the things that have already been done. Okay. You talk about that 4,100 units that have already been either they are built or they're on their way to being built. That's a huge deal. And you have some particular tools and programs through Housing North that also help significantly. And I want to talk about a couple of those. Can you tell me more about Zoning Atlas?
Yeah, so we're really excited that we have 6 of our 10 counties that are part of the National Zoning Atlas. So if you go to zoningatlas.org, on the top right, there's a button, and you can see 6 of our counties are now mapped and on this platform. Okay. So it is essentially taking the existing zoning ordinances with a housing lens, mapping and coding those and putting them on an interactive map. So anybody can go on now and see where you can build duplexes, triplexes, quadplexes, where an ADU is allowed by right or where it's not allowed. It's a very visual tool, but it is one step, I would say, in a bigger picture project to really help coordinate the housing development along with the natural resource protection and all of the other things that are needed. You can't just build housing if, first of all, zoning doesn't allow it. People react to zoning. So we find that this could be a tool to help encourage zoning reform, but also to help communities just really understand their zoning visually. Yeah. If you go on it right now, so Grand Traverse County was the first one to be done. So thanks to the Grand Traverse County Economic Development Corporation and the Brookby Foundation, we were able to do the full scope of work, which is the zoning atlas, and then creating a growth corridor plan and scenarios for neighborhoods to help encourage housing development.
I mean, that is... It feels like it's a simple tool, but what a necessary tool to have for, just for education.
Yes, it's necessary. I wish we had it years ago.
Yes.
We're partnering with the National Zoning Atlas, as I mentioned, and then Michigan Association of Planning. So hopefully within a couple months, all 10 counties will be done. And then we can work with those communities to figure out, what do we do with this zoning atlas tool? Right. How do you want to use it? I don't want to push my agenda. Yeah. I do feel like each county, like I said, has its own personality and needs. So Emmett County will be the next one to do the full scope. And then we'll see what other counties, want to do with that data. But I think it will help inform infrastructure where we need infrastructure. You can't do housing without infrastructure. Right. A lot of housing are the tools, and really helping communities, even if they're small and rural. What are some really small changes you can make? And then what are some visual examples? Because as we talked about, people react to that housing. I was up in Northport, lovely community. They really care. But there's a piece of property that is a little bit controversial. So we tried to present scenarios and ideas of how you could maybe protect some of that land, but then also have a cottage court or have duplexes with ADUs. So I think people want that visual. Yeah. The zoning atlas can help with that.
Yeah. And it looks, I'm looking at it right now, and it's very user friendly.
It is.
Even I can figure it out.
They have thought about just about everything. Yeah. We're going to do another webinar on November 6th with the National Zoning Atlas team. And then at the Housing Summit, which I'll just give a quick shameless plug.
Oh yeah, we're going to talk about that.
Okay. Yep. So it'll be at the Housing Summit. We'll have a new page on our website. But it really is user-friendly. I think people need to use it first, get used to it, and then we'll try to, do workshops and help people understand it more.
Well, fantastic. Can you tell me a little bit about Housing Ready, too, which is kind of the core of Housing North?
Yeah, so Housing Ready program started when I first took this job in 2020, and it really is a program to place technical support teams in a community to help them become what we call housing ready. And we have 6 steps. I wish I had them all memorized right now. I can kind of go over them, but there's a checklist.
Sure.
There's a toolkit. And it is basically placing somebody in a community. Initially, it was a 3-year program to help them be that person constantly beating the housing drum. And I know that sounds kind of silly, but without that person, really those solutions don't move forward.
Yeah. I mean, I know this is going to sound trivial. I'm not trying to make it, but it seems so simple when you think about it. Like, of course you need that person doing that. Of course this makes sense. And is part of this, the conversations that you're having too, is really just speaking in a way that is easy for everyone to understand as well in the community? Because I do think people get convoluted ideas, or they start to get sort of bogged down by all of the conversation, the big words, and going, I don't know about that. So they almost disconnect. Just to make something feel like it's tangible and understandable does make a difference too. Yeah, certainly. And I think it does take a unique individual to staff these positions. And so that's been a journey for sure. But I think having somebody there to make connections, to help provide resources. So we don't have a lot of community development staff in our region. I should have mentioned that. So not like other communities like Detroit and Kalamazoo. They will have a whole team. They will have a housing department. That really doesn't exist. In some communities in a small way here, but Grand Traverse County, I would say, and Emmett County would be the best examples of having some staff to work with. Right. But without that, our team is critical. So we have very rural townships with part-time staff and part-time, opportunities. So I think our team is critical, and we can do that in a lot of ways. But the 3-year program was really intended to get somebody in there, help develop programs and processes and move things forward. Yeah. And then be able to move to other counties and communities. I mean, it's a fantastic idea. I love it. Thank you. As we move into looking ahead, if everything goes right, let's just say, let's put out the crystal ball and let's be really positive in our intentions and thinking. And if everything goes right now, what does Northwest Michigan housing look like in 10 years? That's a really good question. I think 10 years is a good mark from now. I think by then we will really start to see the results of our zoning atlas and zoning reform. I think we'll start to see more and more communities create those programs, be able to handle the housing tools, to be able to create those incentive packages. People are afraid of developers here. They think it's such a bad name, and we don't tend to embrace them, but they are bringing in opportunity, resources. They're increasing the tax base. There's a lot of opportunity here. I think it can be done well. I think the zoning atlas will allow us to do that in a coordinated way. So I have a conservation background. I also have a strategic planning. A lot of my background is in watershed planning. I think we need everyone to come together to make those core decisions instead of reacting to where the development is happening. Let's make some strategic decisions. Let's protect our watersheds. Let's align zoning with land use. I think we really have an opportunity here. So I guess my hopeful side is that this will be coordinated not just in our region, but across the state. I don't want to go off on my conservation side, but we are in the 28th, I think it's the 28th biosphere region. So there's a internationally designated bioregion, and we're in it. Yeah. So I think we have a responsibility. It's called Obatawang, and it covers from south of us all the way over into Canada and most of the UP. So we have an opportunity to allow growth to happen because we're climate neutral while protecting our natural resources. While protecting, though. Yeah, absolutely. So I believe that can happen, but it can't happen without strategy and planning and collaboration. Well, on that note, what keeps you motivated in this work? That's a good question. I guess I'm a positive person. I try to be hopeful. I think it's the stories I hear of success. I think it's seeing my team out there every day. We get colorful emails, and we sometimes feel like we are on the stand when I'm at a public meeting, and I'm not going to lie. I will be doing that in November quite a few times, justifying what work we've done and kind of sharing the numbers. So I don't know. I think I just know that there's a solution, and I believe that Northwest Michigan can come together around this. But it doesn't come without, every day kind of being like, okay, we got this, let's get back at it again. I think breaks are important. Yeah. That's a really good point. You want to reduce burnout. You want to take breaks. You want to maintain the positivity, all those good things. I think this is a good opportunity to talk about the Housing Summit, the annual Northwest Michigan Housing Summit that is coming up on October 27th and 28th. And the theme this year is rooted in community. When you actually talk about coming together, the summit brings people together. Can you tell us a little bit more about that and what people can expect if they're attending?
Yeah, so it's our 11th year. I guess I've been coordinating this with our teams for 6 years now. It's really exciting. It is a very regional conference, but it's grown, and I think people are now coming from all over, and I'm really excited that you're going to be our MC this year.
Yes, I know. I'm super excited too. I think I was already ready to attend, and then you said, "Hey, do you want to MC?" I said, "Yes."
Well, and I think for me, I've been doing it for years. It's not really my comfort zone, but also it has just gotten big.
Yeah,
and there's a lot of moving parts that it's nice to have someone else do that so I can be more focused. Sure. We do a state of the region, so we really try to set the tone for the summit and really open it in a very positive way. So the morning we're all together, and we have a keynote and some sessions. So we have a coalition to end homelessness, and I feel really inspired by the work they're doing, and I do believe they are going to meet their goal. I think our community can come around and end homelessness, and being a part of that feels inspirational. Yeah. So we often didn't highlight those on the lower end of the income spectrum or that the housing need. Often, it was sort of that uncomfortable space, I would say, for a while, and still is. But I think it's really important to highlight everything happening in our region at the summit.
So who should attend this summit?
Everybody. But I would say elected and appointed officials. Okay. I would say advocates, developers, people who want to learn. So even if you're a small-scale developer, show up. There's a lot to learn. I think it's a connecting piece. There will be a lot of sponsors and agencies there that will help inform, but there'll be a lot of local examples, people sharing what they've done, what different communities have done. I'm really excited that NMCAA, or a community action agency, will be there to talk about their role, because our communities can't move these tools forward without support. So what are the agencies that support that? So don't be afraid if you're just a part-time township. Come to this and learn about how the other agencies can help you.
Right.
I think we tend to be like, no, we can't do that, and kind of at times make excuses. But I think our region really is learning and coming together to step up. So I think the summit will showcase that. And then we have a bus tour on the second day, which is new and added last year. So we'll go to some manufactured and modular communities. So we'll actually see. I believe that's almost full. So but if there's spots, we can let people in. But the second day is more intentional, I guess, for people who really want to learn and be there. And there's a leadership happy hour. So we try to get electeds and even state representatives to come. And then afterwards, after your full day of content, you can have a cocktail or not and just visit and network. So networking is a huge part.
Yeah, that's a big part of it. You can register for both days. You can register for one day, and you can do that at housingnorth.org.
Yes. There is a tab just for the Housing Summit.
Yeah. Again, really easy to navigate this. I love websites for people like me where I'm like, I'm overwhelmed.
Not everybody
by the words
that way, so thank you.
No, it's great. So yeah, you can go ahead and do that. And I would definitely suggest, as you said, anybody who's interested in this, who either is in this world, but also people who are interested in this world. I think one of the things that we're trying to remind people of is that this does affect everyone. The housing, what we're doing with housing in northern Michigan and northwest Michigan is not just for people who are in that world. It literally will affect everyone. So being knowledgeable about it, understanding your role in it, is really a big deal.
It is. And I think every year we've seen the list change. And we have over 34 sponsors this year.
Wow.
And that's huge. And I think people want to be a part of it. The trickiest part is getting people to actually register.
Yeah.
And then because October is, conference month.
Yes.
It is at the tail end, but it's peak season. We love to have it at the Hagerty.
Yeah.
And I think it also, for me, it's sort of like a peak refresh moment. So we want to highlight what our policy initiatives to be. We get feedback from the Regional Housing Partnership. And then we kind of reset and then look at what Housing North and the region's priorities should be for next year. We don't just create these in a silo. We are part of a network. And so we use the summit as that platform, and then we'll take all of that with the Regional Housing Partnership that we lead, and then next year hopefully create some more housing tools and solutions.
Well, hopefully we will see even more people at the summit this year, housingnorth.org. And Yarrow, I just want to say thank you so much for sharing all about Housing North, but also about your own personal piece in your own personal part in Housing North, your background as well. I really, truly believe with your background, you're the exact person we need for this position. So thank you for continuing to be the advocate for housing here in Northwest Michigan. And I just want to thank you for being on the podcast, too. I'm very excited to have you.
Well, I love your podcast, and I'm so excited you're going to be our MC. So
thank you so much. I'm very excited as well. Thank you so much for being a part of Currently the Conversation today. Be sure to subscribe to Currently the Conversation. Super easy to do. Go to christalfrost.com. You can also find us wherever you get your podcasts, and you can watch full episodes on Facebook and YouTube. We will be back next Monday for Currently the Conversation. See you then.